My name is Sponge and welcome back to another Dota 2 Academy. This week I'm going to be talking about jungling. Jungling is basically a technique of, instead of going into a lane, you stand around and you go into your friendly jungle and you just kill all of the neutral creeps repeatedly and get loads of money. Now, the advantage of that are twofold, and I'll explain them in a moment. But first things first, we want to get out there. So starting items, Ursa is a character that nearly always jungles. The only time he doesn't jungle, perhaps, is if there's another jungler who's been picked, but that is not ideal by any means. Maybe shouldn't have got that one first. Anyway, I'm just going to run over, because basically the way that it works with jungling is you've got all these little camps, and all these little camps spawn little different creatures, and there's a bunch of different types of creatures, and I might go into the detail of those in a future video. But to begin with, what you need to know is when they spawn and how they spawn. Now, basically, at the moment, we've got the timer counting down here. Now, I don't know if you've been kind of keeping an eye on this match timer so far when you've been playing your games, but when you are playing as a jungler, it's vital that you keep an eye on this clock, because this clock is your bread and butter. This clock lets you know when you need to be doing everything, basically. Especially in the early stages of the game, it's vital. Now, the first camp you want to be killing is this camp here. Now, this camp, boom, is the easy camp. If we're up on the dire side, then it's here. Boom. So basically, you want to kind of come and stand near it, but not too close to it. Because the way these camps work is if you stand too close to a camp, then you'll actually stop creatures from spawning there, which means it's important to kind of hang around in an area nearby, but not too close. So at the moment, we're just waiting for the timer. Now, in the first instance, this small camp always spawns at 30 seconds. Usually, it will spawn at 1 minute. But 30 seconds. Okay, so we go. And this is what you do at the start of the game. Basically, you just go in. There's no real presence. These guys are all the same, so there's no kind of target here of which one we want to hit first. But usually, when you're fighting a camp and there's one creep bigger than the rest on the small camps, you do want to kind of focus fire on the big one first, because they tend to do the most damage or have the most abilities. But you'll see here, I'm taking a bit of damage, but I'm also, my Fury swipes are doing a decent amount on there. I'm not sure if I should have gone for that first or not. I can never remember whether you want to go for this one first or this one first, but basically with Ursa, you want to just max it out. But you see what I did there? I ran away from the camp, and then it means a minute has just hit, and et voila, as if by magic, oh, there's more back. So the way this works, basically, is if you're near a camp when it happens, then you are not going to get any more creeps. But the ideal, what you want to do at the start of the game is to quickly go in there, kill them all, and then be away from the camp before a minute hits on the clock, and that means you can go and kill that camp again. And this really is the trick of jungling, is keeping an eye on the clock and knowing that at 1 minute, every minute, the camp's reset. So this is going all right so far. I'm doing quite well with Ursa, but now I've got a bit of time, you see. It's 1:39. Now, what I could do is I could come down here and fight these guys. Now, this isn't a terrible idea, actually, because these big birdie chaps are not too tough. I'm probably going to get in a bit of trouble if I try and fight them, but I'll use my active and I might be able to kill one of them. Take a bit of a risk. Yeah, I'm not going to hang around there, actually, because as you can see, they're sort of beasting me a little bit. Not quite strong enough. But generally speaking, if you're jungling, it's not a bad idea just to circulate between these two camps to begin with. Just because of the fact that as long as I stay down in this area of the map, just down here, I'm kind of safe. Like, nobody's going to cause me any grief here. I'm kind of hidden away. You can see there's a chance that somebody might come down here and start giving me grief, but at this stage in the game, it's very unlikely, and it means I'm kind of out of trouble. Whereas if I was messing around with these camps over here, then whilst I'd be providing some extra vision, which might help the guys in the bottom lane, it's a bit of a risk. It's a bit of a risk because somebody might come in and start giving me grief and go for an early gank. Now, there's a real trick to jungling, because as you'll see, I'm already quite low on health. And there is a real trick to making sure that you keep yourself in a decent state whilst also not having to give up the jungle. Now, this is important. These guys are trouble, okay? So these big dudes here, they are Ursas. So they're actually the same as me. They're kind of like a nastier red version. In the early stages of the game, these guys will really mess you up because they can use Thunderclap, which basically, it stuns you. And they do a lot of damage. So basically, avoid camps with those in. So if the camp you want to farm has got that in it, just kind of ignore it. These guys are a lot safer. You want to basically, to begin with, ignore the Ursas and ignore the Centaur Warriors. So with Ursa, it's just very much a case of trying to save up, getting that Ring of Basilius, and that will give me the kind of bonus defense, and then going for a Morbid Mask as soon as I can, and a Ring of Health. And quite quickly, you can become really self-sufficient here. and you can be doing loads and loads and loads of damage. And you'll see here, obviously, I've just gone for pretty much pure healing stuff, whereas actually, if I was playing another character, and I'll show you in a minute, you might not want to do that. One of the advantages of having Tango this, and the advantage for any kind of jungler, is particularly in this camp up here, you can do a funny little trick. So if I go like this, obviously, when you use Tangos, you eat a tree. Nom, nom, nom. And by doing this, it actually means what I can do is I can kind of quickly access 2 camps at once, and when you get rid of a tree, it'll be gone for 6 minutes. Which means that you can really take advantage of that time. And here you'll see, actually, you can really be cheeky because it means you can be fighting this camp when only one of them can hit you. And that's a really useful technique for taking on camps that maybe are slightly harder than you can handle. It means, you know, I'm basically hardly taking any flag here and getting a decent amount of XP. Now, a character like Ursa will basically want to spend most of the game just doing this. Whereas other characters, like Lifestealer, for example, won't be able to jungle as quickly and as efficiently as Ursa, and so you might want to go and spend a bit more time ganking in between. As soon as you get to level 6, get that ulti, pop out into lane, cause some trouble. While Ursa specialises in just getting down and dirty and slicing people up, another favourite of mine for jungling is Nature's Prophet. Now, Nature's Prophet is a bit more tricky, but he does function in a very different way. So obviously, when we go early items here, we've got a very different style of thing. We don't want to go for a stout shield because preferably we're not going to get hit that much because we're going to be using our funny little tree bros to do that for us. And you might not even want to go for this many having some tangos to break up those trees and do that tree trick I just showed you is kind of cool. But well, I'll show you how I think you should try and practice Nature's Prophet. So first of all, a nice little trick for an ATP is obviously go for the tree trick first, and then it means you can actually make some trees, send them off, and then, because you'll see it uses a lot of mana here, that tree trick, to begin with. So you want to basically, you can make them in the fountain and then send them off. Now, I've done the timing of this very badly because you'll see here that already these guys are running off. And by the time it gets to 30 seconds, by the time that first camp appears, these trees will already be gone. So I timed that very badly. But basically, you want to wait until the match is kind of just about to start, maybe kind of 5 seconds, and then send the trees over, and bosh, you get some free trees and get all your mana back. So basically the trick with Nature's Prophet is you kind of want to use your trees to soak up as much damage as possible whilst not getting hit yourself. The idea is basically to make sure that your trees are constantly flacking up all the damage, and you have to use a little bit of micro skill to make sure that the right trees are getting hit. So which basically means that if you've got, say, 3 or 4 trees, you want to just pull the one back just before it dies, get it out of there, and it means that these guys will focus on the other trees that have got more health, and then you can send that tree back into the fight to make sure it's doing the damage without being killed. Ideally, what I want to be doing is just spending my money on some clarity potions instead of tangos, which basically means I can be making sure that I get this health here. And I've got to be careful here, actually, because if I get hit whilst using a clarity, then that effect will stop working. I don't know if you're aware of that, but if you aren't, you are now. And it means that I'm just going to get out of here now because I don't want to get hit by that bird and lose this lovely clarity effect. Now, the advantage, of course, of not buying any tangos, it gives me some more money early on to spend on some better stuff. And what I've done is I've bought a Sage's Mask, which is half of a Ring of Basilius. Now, Ring of Basilius is much more important than, say, boots to begin with, to be honest, for Nature's Prophet, because it means that your trees are tougher. Nature's Prophet is a tough character to get really good at when you're jungling, because really, when you get to about kind of level 5 or 6, you want to be, well, when you get level 6, you want to be using your ultimate to try and finish off kills, and also you want to be using your teleportation to kind of help in fights. So if you see somebody kind of low on health running away, you can just teleport in behind them and bosh them in the face. That's not an easy technique to get used to, and you have to have very good map awareness. But to begin with, if you want to practice jungling, I'd recommend basically just making sure you don't get hit. That's a really vital thing, really. And, you know, micro in the trees. So you'll see here, that guy's getting a little bit low, so just pull him out and pull him back. And yeah, by doing this, it means you can save your money on your healing items and just generally get loads of nice stuff faster. You sometimes get a bit of variation in terms of build styles, and an item which some people like to go for is the Hand of Midas. Now, I do go for this sometimes, but I try not to go for it unless I'm playing in a game with people who I know. Simply because if you're going to go for a Hand of Midas, you want to go for it quickly, because basically it's an expensive item. It costs 500 for the Gloves of Haste, which obviously you want to get ASAP because they're going to increase your attack speed and therefore the damage you're doing. But then the actual recipe costs 1,400. Now, the advantage of having it is it means every 100 seconds you can instantly kill a creep and get 190 gold and 2.5 experience. Now, that, in the early stages of the game, it takes a while to actually get your money back, but once you do, you start really, really raking in the cash. And that means you can get your cool end game items like Aghanim Scepter, you get Desolator, and you can basically turn people like an ATP into an absolute boss. But it is an expensive investment. And if you get it and you forget to use it, then you've really wasted a lot of money. It's one of those things you need to make sure that every time the cooldown's finished, every time it gets to that 100 seconds, you are using it. Most important, however, and I cannot say this enough, is if you are playing a character like Nature's Prophet or Enigma, somebody who relies on mini creeps, don't be getting hit. Like, if you really don't have the mana and you want to just farm a bit more, then maybe take the risk. But generally speaking, you want to make sure that you're keeping your health fairly untouched, because there's no reason for me to be like this now. I'm not in a good way. Obviously, also, you want to max out your skill, which that gives you the kind of helpful creeps. Don't bother faffing around with everything else until that's maxed out, because, frankly, these dudes are your army, and you need them. You need them to stay alive. One important thing to remember when you are jungling with a character who can create his own little creeps, such as Nature's Prophet, is you can leave your creatures to just fight other creatures on their own and wander off, but you need to bear in mind that whilst you will get gold for any last hits that these creatures get, you won't get any experience, which means that you can't be a clever, tricksy one and just leave all these dudes fighting camps and wander off to maximize your XP. I know it seems like a clever idea on paper, but unless you are within range of the XP, you're not going to get any. Finally, the last important thing you really need to know about jungling is it's not the optimal way of getting XP and gold. And in the early stage of the game, the reason you're doing it is so that other people can max out their XP in the lane. But when things start transitioning, don't just stay to the jungle because that's where you think you belong. If you've got a free lane that you can farm, go and farm there. You will get loads more XP and gold by farming an actual lane than you will in the jungle. Obviously, that does depend on you getting good and last hits. And a lot of the reasons that some people like to rely on being a jungler is it's a piece of piss to get last hits, because obviously no one else is hitting anything. And as you can see here, talking whilst playing is flipping hard, and I could not get a single last hit there. But with practice, one day you will be slightly less embarrassing than I am. The last thing I'll say about jungling that's really important is know when to start jungling and when to stop. Now, if you're playing a jungling character, you want to get into the jungle straight away and start hitting up that small camp and just farming away at that, and then work your way up to the bigger camps, and as soon as you can handle them, just keep circulating between the bigger camps to get the maximum XP. But there comes a point when you need to stop doing that, because unless you are one of these characters that can just farm away in the jungle for the whole game, and Nature's Prophet, to be fair, can do that, you do need to make sure you have good map awareness and you help out your team. Now, there are some cases in which you'll want to actually go back and go to the jungle, and I'd say that that's when the lanes are too pushed. So let's just say, for example, that we're in the later stage of this game, and we've destroyed this tower, and we've destroyed this tower, and we've pushed the lanes all the way back up, all the way. Now, that is bad because we can't farm then. How are we supposed to get any farm? Because if we're wandering out over here and killing their creeps here, then it means that we can get ganked and swarmed from so many angles. Unless we've got lots of vision with wards up here, we're going to be in real trouble. And the chance of us having really, really strong vision with wards in a pub game is pretty low. So basically, there are some points in the game which you'll think, you know what, it's not safe for me to go and farm, so I'm just going to take a bit of time, come to the jungle and kill a few creep camps while I wait for the lanes to naturally push themselves closer to us so it's safe. But at the same time, if your team is, having a bad time and they need your help, don't be off in the woods farming away. Some people say, well, I'm jungling, and they kind of use that as an excuse not to engage with the rest of the game, and they go, well, no, because I'm jungling. And obviously the point of you jungling is that it's a means to an end. You're jungling so you can get, as a team, get a level advantage which you can use to win the game. If you then insist on just farming, then you'll often find that your advantage is just completely screwed, and that's it. You're not going to take advantage of that early shove. Anyway, that's pretty much the end of it for my little short guide to how to jungle. If you